I never thought I would become the kind of man who betrays someone he loves. When I say I put my long black tool inside my girlfriend, I don't mean something physical. I mean I let my ambition, my ego, and my silence wedge themselves between us. I let secrecy become the instrument that hollowed out what we once had. And I did it slowly, carefully, almost professionally. Maya Ellison deserved better than the version of me she got in the end that we met 2 years ago at a small art showcase downtown. Maya was standing beside one of her abstract canvases, nervously twisting a silver ring on her finger while pretending not to watch people's reactions. I remember being struck by how honest her paintings felt, messy, vibrant, unguarded. She was nothing like me. I design buildings for a living. Everything I create is structured, measured, controlled. Maya painted feelings. I drafted blueprints. She laughed when I told her work felt structurally emotional, and that laugh hooked me. It wasn't polished or careful. It was real. For the first year, we were inseparable. Maya loved deeply and without calculation. She left handwritten notes in my jacket pockets. She sent voice messages telling me she was proud of me before important meetings. She believed in partnership the way some people believe in fate. Completely. I loved her too. I'm sure of that. But I loved her in a quieter, more conditional way. I showed affection through solutions, not vulnerability. When she felt insecure, I gave advice instead of reassurance. When she wanted closeness, I offered stability at first. That balance worked. The cracks began when my firm assigned me to a high-profile redevelopment project. It meant longer hours, later nights, and more pressure than I'd ever handled. I told myself I was doing it for a future. Maya told me she understood. She always understood. But understanding has a limit. The more exhausted I became, the more I retreated into myself. Maya would ask how my day was, and I'd respond with one-word answers. She'd sit beside me on the couch, waiting for me to lean into her. Sometimes I did. Often, I didn't notice she was waiting. One night she asked, gently, "Are we okay, Ethan?" The question irritated me more than it should have. I heard accusation instead of concern. I told her she was overthinking. I told her work was just stressful. I told her not everything was a crisis. What I didn't tell her was that I felt suffocated by expectation. Not by her love, but by the responsibility of being someone's emotional center. Maya relied on connection to feel secure. I relied on achievement. That difference didn't seem dangerous at first. It just felt inconvenient. Then Lena Whitmore walked into the conference room on a Tuesday morning. She was the marketing strategist hired to represent the investor group behind our project. Lena carried herself with deliberate composure. She didn't fill silence with nervous chatter the way Maya sometimes did. She studied people. She spoke when she had something sharp and efficient to say. During our first meeting, she challenged one of my design concepts without hesitation. Not rudely, not emotionally, just logically. It startled me. Afterward, she caught up to me in the hallway. "You don't like being questioned," she said calmly. "I don't like weak arguments," I replied. She smiled slightly. "Good. Then you'll appreciate strong ones." That was the first crack. Lena didn't ask about my feelings. She didn't want reassurance. She operated in the same structured world I did: deadlines, strategy, results. Conversations with her felt clean, predictable, controlled. With Maya, everything was layered with emotion. With Lena, everything was tactical. I told myself it was harmless to enjoy that contrast. Home, Maya sensed something shifting before I did. She started asking more questions. She wanted to join me for dinner near my office one evening. I told her I was too busy. The truth was, I didn't want the two parts of my world colliding. That it wasn't that I had done anything wrong. Not yet. But secrecy had already begun its work. That I stopped mentioning Lena's name. I referred to meetings vaguely. When Maya asked who I was texting late at night, I said it was the team. Technically, that wasn't a lie. One Friday evening, Maya prepared dinner. Candles lit, music playing softly. She wore the blue dress I once told her made her look like summer. I arrived an hour late, distracted by a strategy discussion that had turned into drinks with Lena and the investors. "You could have called," Maya said quietly. "I told you this project is intense," I answered, dropping my keys on the table. She looked at me in a way that unsettled me. Not angry, not dramatic. Just wounded. "I don't need grand gestures," she said. "I just need to feel like I matter." I hugged her then, partly out of guilt, partly out of habit. She melted into me immediately, forgiving before I even apologized. That was the moment I should have realized how much power I held over her heart. Instead, I felt relieved. Relieved that she didn't push harder. Relieved that loving her was still easy. The following week, Lena and I stayed late, finalizing presentation revisions. The office emptied until it was just us and the glow of computer screens. We talked about career sacrifices, about how relationships can become distractions if you're not careful. Ambition costs something, Lena said that I nodded, though I wasn't sure what it had already cost me. When my phone buzzed with a message from Maya, "Miss you. Don't work too late." I turned the screen face down on the desk, that I didn't want to explain why that small gesture felt inconvenient. That was when I placed the first real wedge between Maya and me. Not through touch, not through physical betrayal, but through preference. I preferred the version of myself that Lena saw, focused, composed, admired for my discipline. With Maya, I was needed. With Lena, I was impressive, and admiration is intoxicating. That I told myself it was just professional alignment. I told myself I loved Maya. I told myself boundaries were intact. But love begins to fracture the moment you start protecting someone else's access to you. To be why the time Maya asked again, "Are you sure we're okay?" I had already begun answering that question elsewhere, and I didn't yet realize how far I was willing to go to avoid admitting it. I told myself there was a line I would never cross. That belief made everything easier. After that late night in the office, Lena Whitmore became part of my daily rhythm. Meetings turned into working lunches. Working lunches stretched into strategy sessions that had little to do with blueprints and everything to do with ambition. She spoke my language: efficiency, leverage, expansion. Around her, I felt sharp and home. Maya Ellison still spoke the language of connection. She asked how I felt about the pressure at work. She suggested weekend trips to reset. She reached for my hand while we watched television, grounding herself in something steady. That I began noticing how different those two worlds felt. With Maya, I was expected to be present. With Lena, I was simply expected to perform. One evening, Lena and I stayed behind after a client rehearsal. The investors had left, satisfied. The office lights dimmed automatically, casting everything in a muted glow. Lena leaned against the conference table and studied me. "You're not as confident as you pretend to be," she said. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation that I surprised myself by answering honestly. "Confidence is easier than vulnerability." She nodded like she understood something essential about me. No probing questions. No emotional unpacking. Just acknowledgement. That restraint felt powerful. Later that night, Maya waited up for me again. She sat curled at one end of the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The lamp beside her cast soft shadows across the room. "You're drifting," she said quietly when I walked in. "I'm just tired," I replied, avoiding her eyes. Maya didn't argue. She simply looked at me with the kind of patience that made my chest tighten. "If something's wrong, Ethan, I want to fight for us. But I can't fight what you won't name." I kissed her forehead instead of answering. That was the second wedge. The following week, Lena invited me to join her at a networking event tied to the project. "You need visibility," she said. "Architects hide behind their work too often." Maya had asked me to attend her friend's small gallery opening the same night. She reminded me twice during the week, hopeful but careful not to pressure me, that I chose the event with Lena. I told Maya the investors were hosting something mandatory. The disappointment flickered across her face before she masked it with understanding. She always chose understanding. The networking event was polished and loud. Lena moved effortlessly through conversations, introducing me with a confidence that made me feel larger than I was. When she spoke about my designs, she emphasized my precision, my foresight, my strategic thinking. That N01 at that event saw me as emotionally unavailable. They saw me as driven. At some point during the evening, Lena rested her hand briefly on my arm while laughing at something I said. The contact was subtle. It lingered a second too long to be accidental. That I didn't pull away. That moment was small enough to deny, but significant enough to change the air between us. Driving home, I noticed 3 missed calls from Maya. When I returned them, she sounded strained. "The gallery went well," she said. "I sold 2 pieces." "That's great," I replied, meaning it. I wished you were there." There was no accusation in her voice, just truth. "I'm building something for us," I said defensively. "These connections matter." "And I don't?" she asked softly. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. When I walked into our apartment, Maya had already gone to bed. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom for a long moment, watching her sleep. The distance between us felt newly defined, like an invisible wall neither of us wanted to acknowledge. The next day, Lena sent me a message. "You were impressive last night. Don't underestimate your impact." That I read it twice. Maya used words like love, future, home. Lena used words like impact, leverage, potential. Both sets of words mattered to me, but in different ways. Daniel Reeves noticed a shift before I admitted it to myself. We met for coffee one afternoon, a rare break in my schedule. You look distracted, Daniel said, stirring his drink. Work? Mostly, I answered. Mostly? He raised an eyebrow that I hesitated. There's someone on the project who gets me. Professionally. Daniel studied me carefully. And Maya, what about her? You don't talk about her the same way lately. I brushed it off, but his observation lodged itself somewhere uncomfortable. Daniel had known me long enough to recognize patterns. I was rationalizing. That night, Lena and I finalized a major presentation alone again. The conversation drifted from strategy to personal sacrifices. Relationships require compromise, Lena said. Sometimes compromise dulls momentum, or it anchors you. I replied, though the words felt uncertain. She stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that the space between us felt charged. Anchors can also keep you from sailing where you're meant to go. I should have left then. Instead, I stayed. Nothing happened that would qualify as undeniable betrayal. No dramatic confession. No physical crossing of boundaries. But the emotional current was undeniable. We were no longer just colleagues aligned by ambition. We were two people exploring the possibility of being understood without effort. When I got home, Maya was sitting at the kitchen table. No blanket, no soft lamp, just stillness. Are you in love with someone else? She asked. The question sliced through every layer of denial I'd built. No. I said immediately, it wasn't a complete lie. I wasn't in love with Lena. Not yet. But love isn't the only threshold that matters. Maya searched my face, as if trying to locate the version of me she once trusted without hesitation. I don't need perfection, Ethan, she whispered. I just need honesty. I told her she was imagining things. I told her stress was distorting everything. I told her I loved her. All of those statements were technically true, but I didn't tell her that I felt seen in a new way by someone else. I didn't tell her that admiration had begun to replace intimacy. I didn't tell her that I looked forward to Lena's messages more than I should. Maya reached across the table and held my hand. Please don't shut me out. I squeezed her fingers, offering reassurance I wasn't certain I could sustain, because the truth was I had already started choosing which parts of myself belonged to whom. And once you begin dividing your loyalty, it's only a matter of time before something breaks. The night everything shifted, it didn't feel dramatic. There was no storm outside, no raised voices, no undeniable line crossed in a single reckless moment. Instead, it happened quietly, the way foundations crack, under pressure over time. The project reached a critical milestone, and Lena Whitmore insisted we celebrate closing the latest investment round. It wasn't framed as personal. It was framed as strategic bonding. Momentum mattered, she said. So did loyalty. We met at a quiet rooftop lounge after work, away from the investors and the firm. The city lights blurred beneath us, and for the first time since this partnership began, there was no pretense of productivity. No laptops, no presentations, just conversation. Lena spoke about her past relationships with clinical clarity. I don't do well with emotional dependency, she admitted. I respect independence. Two people choosing each other, not needing each other. The statement landed heavily. Maya believes in building something shared, I said carefully. And you? Lena asked. The pause that followed revealed more than any confession could have that I didn't answer directly. Instead, I spoke about pressure, about expectation, about the quiet fear of disappointing someone who sees you as their future. Lena listened without interrupting, her gaze steady and unreadable. You're carrying responsibility like it's romance, she said finally. But responsibility isn't intimacy. That sentence unsettled me because it felt partially true. When my phone buzzed, I knew without looking that it was Maya Ellison. She had texted earlier about dinner, about trying a new recipe. I hadn't responded. Lena noticed the hesitation before I silenced the screen. You don't have to explain yourself to me, she said. That was precisely what made it dangerous. Later that evening, when the rooftop emptied and the staff began stacking chairs, Lena and I lingered near the railing. The distance between us felt smaller than it ever had before. She didn't reach for me. She didn't need to. I won't compete with someone who already has your heart, she said calmly. The implication was clear. She would, however, accept the parts of me I was already offering. Driving home, I rehearsed explanations for why I'd been unreachable. Traffic, meetings, dead battery. Each excuse sounded thin, even in my own mind. When I opened the apartment door, The lights were off, except for the kitchen. Maya sat at the table again, but this time there were no questions waiting in her eyes. Only exhaustion. You missed dinner, she said, I know. You didn't answer your phone. I was busy. She studied me for a long moment, and I felt something fragile slipping away. I don't recognize you lately, Maya whispered. You're here, but you're not with me. The truth rose to the surface, sharp and immediate. I wasn't. Instead of admitting that, I leaned into defensiveness. This project is intense. I'm doing this for us. For us. Her voice trembled slightly. Or for you. The distinction felt unfair, yet accurate. That night, we slept on opposite edges of the bed. The space between us felt deliberate, as if drawn with invisible ink. The following days accelerated. Lena and I worked closely on final revisions before a major public presentation. Our collaboration became seamless. She anticipated my concerns before I voiced them. I valued her perspective instinctively. Admiration evolved into reliance. During one late afternoon rehearsal, Lena closed the conference room door and faced me with unusual directness. Are you staying because you love her? She asked. Or because leaving would make you the villain? The question cornered me. I do love her, I insisted. But are you fulfilled? Lena pressed. Fulfillment. The word echoed. Maya fulfilled emotional needs I rarely articulated. She offered warmth, reassurance, shared dreams. But Lena fulfilled something sharper. My hunger for growth, validation, alignment that in that moment, I understood that love and fulfillment were not synonymous. And that realization frightened me. That evening, I went home determined to repair something. Maya was painting in the living room, her canvas layered in restless strokes of dark blue and gray. She didn't look up immediately when I entered. It's beautiful, I said. It's honest, she replied. The tension between us felt tangible. I don't want to lose you, she said suddenly, setting down her brush. But I feel like I already am. I moved closer, kneeling beside her chair. For a second, everything inside me softened. This was the woman who had believed in me before investors did, who celebrated my smallest victories, who loved without calculation. And yet, even as I held her hands, a part of me remained elsewhere. I'm here, I said, but the words lacked conviction. Maya searched my face the way someone searches for proof of life after a disaster. If there's someone else, she began carefully, tell me before I have to discover it myself. There isn't, I answered, again, not a complete lie. There was no affair in the traditional sense. No undeniable betrayal she could point to, but there was emotional migration. The next day, the presentation succeeded beyond expectation. Applause filled the room. Investors congratulated us. Lena's smile met mine across the crowd, and in that exchange, there was shared triumph. Later, when everyone dispersed, Lena approached me quietly. You were exceptional, she said. So were you. The silence that followed wasn't professional. It wasn't ambiguous anymore either. I won't push, Lena added. But I won't pretend this isn't something. Something not defined, not labeled, but undeniable. That night, I didn't go straight home. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at my phone. 2 names, 2 worlds, 2 versions of myself. Maya sent a message. I'm proud of you. Call me when you're done celebrating. Lena sent 1 minute later. We make a strong team. The difference in tone felt like a crossroads in that parked car. I realized the tool I had driven between Maya and me wasn't ambition alone. It was avoidance. I had avoided hard conversations, avoided admitting dissatisfaction, avoided choosing. And avoidance is its own form of betrayal. I started the engine, but didn't yet know which direction I was truly heading. And for the first time, I understood that soon, not choosing would become a choice of its own. I chose movement over courage. Instead of going home that night, I drove back toward the office. I told myself I needed to pick up documents I had forgotten, but the truth was simpler. I wasn't ready to face Maya Ellison with the weight of my divided loyalty pressing against my chest. The building was nearly empty when I arrived. The security lights cast long reflections across the polished floors. Lena Whitmore was still there, seated at the conference table, reviewing notes on her tablet. You came back, she said, not surprised. I needed air. I replied. Lena studied me carefully. She had a way of observing without chasing answers. That restraint made confession feel voluntary instead of forced. You don't look like a man celebrating, she said. I'm not sure what I'm celebrating, I admitted. The silence between us felt intentional, heavy with implication. Every step that had led here, every late meeting, every unanswered call, every emotional retreat, stood behind us like witnesses. I won't ask you to choose, Lena said finally. But I won't pretend I don't feel this. There it was. Clear. Undeniable. She stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough to erase ambiguity. The air shifted. My pulse followed. For weeks, I had convinced myself that what we shared was intellectual alignment, professional chemistry, mutual respect. Now I had to confront the truth. I had invested emotional energy into Lena that belonged to Maya. I never meant for this to happen, I said. It didn't just happen, Lena replied gently. You let it. She was right. Nothing physical crossed the line that night, but something more significant did. I stopped resisting the idea of us. I allowed the possibility to exist without shutting it down. I didn't step away. I didn't defend my relationship. I stood there and let the tension remain. That was my choice. When I finally left the office, it was past midnight. Maya was awake when I entered the apartment, sitting in the dim light of the living room. Her eyes were swollen, not from dramatic crying, but from quiet realization. You weren't celebrating, she said before I spoke. It wasn't a question. How do you know? I asked, though I already understood. Because you look like someone who's already gone. Her words settled into me with unbearable precision that I sat across from her, the coffee table between us feeling like a border. For the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for an excuse. There's someone, I said carefully. Maya closed her eyes for a brief second, as if steadying herself against impact. Are you in love with her? No, I answered, and this time it was entirely true. But you want to be? She asked. I didn't respond quickly enough. The silence confirmed what I couldn't articulate. Maya inhaled slowly, her composure remarkable in its restraint. Did you touch her? No, another truth. Yet it sounded hollow even to me. You didn't have to, she whispered. You left long before that. Her understanding cut deeper than accusation would have. I didn't plan this, I said. It started with work, with conversations. I felt understood. And I don't understand you? Maya asked, not angrily, but vulnerably. You do, I said. You understand me emotionally. But with her, I feel aligned. The word felt cruel as soon as I spoke it. Maya nodded slowly, absorbing the distinction. So I'm the heart, she said quietly. And she's the ambition. When framed that way, the division sounded calculated. I never wanted to hurt you, I said, aware of how insufficient that was. But you protected her feelings before you protected mine, Maya replied. That's what hurts. She stood and walked toward the window, staring out at the city lights. I saw her shoulders rise and fall as she gathered strength. I asked you to be honest, she continued. I gave you room to tell me the truth. Instead, you made me doubt my instincts. That was the part one hadn't fully confronted. My avoidance hadn't just created distance. It had eroded her trust in herself. Daniel Reeves once told me that betrayal isn't defined by physical acts. It's defined by where your loyalty rests when it's tested. I understood that now with painful clarity. I still love you, I said. Maya turned to face me, tears finally spilling over. Love isn't the only thing that sustains a relationship, Ethan. Her voice didn't break. It solidified. I can compete with a lot of things, she added softly. But I can't compete with a version of you that feels more alive somewhere else. The truth in that statement left no space for argument. I need time, she said. The words felt like a verdict. Time for what? I asked, to decide if I can stay with someone who had to lose me emotionally before realizing my worth. She walked past me toward the bedroom, leaving the conversation suspended in unfinished air that I remained seated, staring at the space she had occupied moments before. For the first time, the cost of my choices felt tangible. Not theoretical, not strategic. Personal that why phone buzzed in my pocket. Lena, are you okay? The timing felt almost cruel. Point two women. Two messages. Two directions. For weeks, I had avoided choosing. Now the absence of a decision was collapsing into consequence that I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked toward the closed bedroom door and understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Ambition had never required secrecy. Alignment had never required emotional displacement. I had used those justifications to avoid confronting dissatisfaction within myself. The tool I drove between us wasn't Lena. That it was my inability to communicate honestly. When the relationship first began to strain, I finally typed a reply to Lena. I need to fix what I broke. Then I set the phone down. But as the silence of the apartment settled around me, I realized fixing something doesn't guarantee it can be restored. And for the first time, I wasn't certain whether I had already waited too long.